After World War II, the once mighty nations of Japan, Germany, and Great Britain lay in ruins. The Soviet Union was also devastated by the war, but the Soviet Union still maintained a strong military presence because of its key role in defeating Nazi Germany and its occupation of Eastern Europe after the war. Two nations came out of the war strong enough to dominate world affairs. These superpowers were the US and the Soviet Union. There were some signs that the superpowers might work together after World War II, such as the Soviet Union's decision to join the United Nations. However, because the ideals and ambitions of the two superpowers were as opposite as the North and South poles, cooperation did not last for long. That rivalry that emerged between the US and the USSR, which is the Soviet Union, created a bipolar world, a world that was deeply divided into two warring camps. The Soviet Union was born out of the Russian Revolution of 1917. That year, the revolutionaries known as the Bolsheviks overthrew the Russian government and later killed Russia's royal family. The Bolsheviks were inspired by the writings of a German philosopher named Karl Marx. In his Communist Manifesto, written in 1848, Marx called on the workers of the world to unite and overthrow the capitalist economic system. Under capitalism, farms and businesses are privately owned by individuals with money or capital. According to Marx, wealthy capitalists took advantage of the labor of workers to enrich themselves. Marx claimed that the future belonged to an economic system he called communism. Under communism, workers would own all farms and businesses and run them for the benefit of everyone. The result, Marx predicted, would be a workers' paradise. The Bolsheviks called the ruling councils of workers Soviets. But in the new Soviet Union, power became concentrated in the central government rather than in the committees of workers. When Joseph Stalin took over the government in the 1920s, he was determined to transform the Soviet Union from a backward rural nation into a modern industrial giant. Stalin stamped out all of the individual ownership of farms and businesses. The government took over all economic planning. The Soviet people were forced to work for government-run farms and factories. So all of this is happening before World War II. To protect his power, Stalin turned the Soviet Union into a vast police state. No one was safe from the prying eyes and ears of Stalin's spies and secret police. Enemies of the people, those suspected of opposing Stalin, were ruthlessly eliminated. During the 1930s, at least 8 million people were executed in the Soviet Union. Millions more were imprisoned in labor camps. Instead of a workers' paradise, the Soviet Union became a brutal dictatorship containing communism. Most Americans were appalled by what was happening in the Soviet Union. They saw communism as a cruel system that took away people's property and denied them such basic rights as freedom of speech and religion. Even worse, the Soviet government was doing all it could to spread communism to other countries. Americans saw Stalin's takeover of Eastern Europe as proof that he intended to convert the whole world to communism. President Trump responded to his threat with a foreign policy known as containment. The goal of this policy was to keep communism from spreading any further by containing or limiting it to the countries where it had already taken hold. Truman first turned his attention to Europe, where World War II had left many people homeless and hungry. In 1947, George Marshall, Truman's Secretary of State, developed a plan to help Europe recover from the war. Under the Marshall Plan, the United States sent vast amounts of money to 16 nations in Europe for rebuilding their cities, railroads, factories, and electric systems. As life in these countries improved, the appeal of communism weakened. Both Americans and Europeans hailed the Marshall Plan as a success. The effort to contain communism suffered a major setback in 1949 when Mao Zedong's communist revolutionaries seized control of China, the world's most populous nation. With the success of this revolution, over 500 million people came under communist rule. The Cold War created a new set of divisions in the world. The US and its democratic, industrialized allies came to be known as the First World Nations. The Soviet Union and its communist allies were seen as a second world. There was also a third world of poorer, less developed nations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Many of these countries gained their independence from colonial rulers in 1950s and 1960s. Both the United States and the Soviet Union tried to convince these nations to join their team in the Cold War. Both superpowers also intervened, often secretly, in third world nations throughout the Cold War when they felt the interests of their side were being threatened. But many third world countries, such as India, remained non-aligned nations, countries that refused to line up with either side.